The sky didn't look like the sky anymore. Not because of pollution or some weather disaster. No, that would have been too easy. It was their ships, thousands of them, hanging in the atmosphere like dark gods watching a world they were about to claim. They didn't announce themselves, didn't send diplomats or messages. They just came and started taking. The first wave hit New York, Tokyo, Rio, and Nairobi all at once. 1 minute you were scrolling your feed, the next, the air lit up with screams and fire. Their pods dropped like comets, smashing into the ground, and from each one crawled out death in armor. Biomechanical freaks, part machine, part nightmare, efficient, brutal, cold. They didn't wipe us out. They harvested us. And we begged. Oh, we begged, broadcasted every language across every channel. We surrender, please stop. But nothing came. No reply, no mercy, and no help. No allies came. Turns out all those stories about interstellar unity, alien civilizations banding together in peace? Bullshit. The moment Earth lit up like a bonfire, the galaxy looked away. Maybe they were afraid. Maybe they thought we weren't worth saving. Either way, the message was clear. We were on our own. By day 5, governments started falling apart. The UN crumbled. The United States turned on itself. China went dark. Russia just vanished. Some said their leaders sold them out for survival. Others said they never had a plan to begin with. It didn't matter anymore. People scattered. Everyone became prey. The weak preyed. The strong died trying to act tough. And then there were the others, the ones who didn't flinch. I met them after crawling out from the wreck of a subway tunnel in what used to be Philadelphia. I was running low on supplies, low on hope. That's when I met Riker. At first I thought he was just another scavenger. Big guy, bald head, thick scars across his face like he used his cheek to block bullets. He had a makeshift rifle built from alien parts, and a smile that never reached his eyes. He stared me down, then said, "You either know how to shoot, or you're about to learn real fast." I didn't argue. I just followed. Riker took me to an old storage facility turned war bunker. Inside were the last people I ever expected to see alive. Mercs, deserters, ex-cons, lunatics, and former soldiers with kill counts higher than their IQs. They weren't organized. Hell, they barely got along. But they had one thing in common. They refused to die easy. They called themselves the Black Flame. And from what I could see, it fit. These people had burned in war, and what came out of the fire wasn't human anymore. Not in the way normal folks think. These were survivors of 1,000 battles, humanity's leftovers, the broken, the vengeful, the ones who learned that peace was just the pause between wars. They didn't want justice. They didn't want peace treaties. They wanted payback. There was a woman, Antonova, former Spec Ops, Russian or something like it. She wore alien armor she peeled off a dead commander, said it still bled when she cut into it. One guy, Malik, claimed he killed a dropship pilot with nothing but a broken pipe and a grudge. No one argued with him. Riker handed me a plasma-bolted shotgun and looked me dead in the eyes. "You here to survive or to make 'em bleed?" I hesitated. I wasn't a fighter. Before all this, I was just a mechanic. I fixed things. Didn't even own a weapon until 2 weeks ago. But when I thought about the burning cities, my little brother taken in the harvest, and my mother crushed under rubble from their landing, I clenched my fists and said, "I'm here to make them regret coming." That's when I became one of them. Not a hero, not a soldier, just a man with nothing left but rage and a weapon in his hands. The governments fell. The weak ran. The galaxy turned its back. But we turned toward the fire. We weren't humanity's last hope. We were the last mistake those aliens would ever make. We didn't waste time mourning the past. There was no room for it. You either adapted or you got left behind. Dead or worse. The ones who made it this far weren't thinking about what they'd lost. They were thinking about what they could still destroy. That was the new world's currency: violence, vengeance, and a sheer, unrelenting will to stay standing. The Black Flame wasn't a militia. It was a pack of wolves dressed like humans. We didn't salute. We didn't raise flags or sing anthems. We just moved, silent, angry, ready. Riker taught me more in 2 days than my whole life ever had. How to spot a scout drone before it spotted you. How to wire alien tech into old Earth rifles. How to hold your breath just long enough so you don't get tagged by the trackers that sense carbon dioxide. He never yelled, never praised, just watched me like I was either going to die or turn into something useful. I learned. Fast. The first raid we did was a resource run. One of the smaller pods had crashed into the ruins of a shopping mall. Most of the scavengers stayed away. Too risky. We didn't. Riker said there were power cells in there, and the aliens didn't guard crashed tech like they used to. They'd gotten cocky. Bad move. There were 6 of us. Riker led. Antonova had our rear. Malik was strapped with makeshift explosives and a grin that never left. I was told to follow, shoot if told, and don't ask questions. The mall was a carcass: twisted steel, broken glass, melted ceiling tiles. The smell of rot and something worse, something mechanical and fungal at the same time, hung thick in the air. We moved through what used to be a food court, stepping over skeletons still strapped into scorched chairs. I don't know why I looked. Maybe I was still hoping to feel something. But I didn't. Not anymore. We found the pod half embedded in the foundation, still warm, still glowing. Riker motioned to the others, and they spread out like shadows. I was about to ask how long we had before a response team came, then I saw it. A harvest drone. Big, bulky, ugly, shaped like a beetle, armored like a tank. It wasn't moving, not at first. Then its eyes, glowing blue slits, flickered to life. I froze. Riker didn't. 3 shots rang out. Not from one weapon, but from 3 different directions. The drone twitched, spun, then exploded into pieces, blue fluid spraying like a geyser. Malik laughed. Boom, bitch. Antonova kicked a limb aside like it was trash and grabbed the core out of its chest cavity. Still warm. We're good. That was the first time I saw it in action. Coordination without words. These people didn't need speeches. They didn't need ranks. They operated like predators, precise, deadly, unforgiving, and for the first time since the invasion, I felt something close to purpose. We got back to the bunker just before sunset. The sky looked sick, permanently stained with the soot of burned cities and alien fuel. I sat down, breathing heavy, checking the gashes in my gloves. That's when Riker tossed something at me. I caught it on reflex. An alien knife. Curved. Black metal, still pulsing like it was alive. You earned it, he said simply. I didn't know what to say. Just nodded. That night we sat around a fire fueled by broken furniture and melted circuit boards. Malik passed around a flask of something strong and awful. Antonova sharpened her blade, the sound scraping like bones against stone. Riker cleaned his rifle like a surgeon. Someone asked me what I did before the invasion. Mechanic, I said. Damn, Malik muttered. You really upgraded. They laughed, but not in a mocking way. It wasn't the kind of laughter I remembered from the old world. Fake, polite, laced with bullshit. This was raw, honest. It sounded like people who had made peace with the worst and were laughing anyway. You miss it? Antonova asked. I stared into the fire. I miss being someone else. Riker nodded, like he knew exactly what I meant. You died when the sky changed, he said. The man you were isn't here anymore. And that's good. He wouldn't have made it. There was no argument. No one challenged it. We all knew it was true. The past was gone. The future didn't exist. Only the now mattered. 2 days later, we launched our first real strike. Not scavenging, not hiding, not surviving. We attacked. There was a relay tower near the outskirts of what used to be Baltimore. Alien-built, humming with the kind of energy that could fry an elephant from 20 meters. It was part of their surveillance grid, a massive system they used to map out resistance movements, track heat signatures, intercept comms. Every cell had dreamed of destroying one. We were going to do it. The plan was suicide. Get close enough to plant a kinetic disruptor at the base, hold off the guards, and then get out before the thing vaporized everything within a mile. Malik volunteered to plant the charge. Hell, if I die, at least I'll die pissing them off. We moved at dusk, under the cover of acid rain and electrical storms. They didn't like storms, interfered with their sensors. We got to the tower's perimeter without being spotted. The thing was huge. Black, covered in spikes and pulsing nodes. It looked alive. Hated just being near it. There were 4 guards, not drones, actual warriors. 10 feet tall, thick armor, glowing weapons, and eyes like headlights. Riker pointed. Antonova nodded. Then hell broke loose. The plan wasn't stealth. It was carnage. We ambushed them from all sides, fire raining down like judgment. The noise was deafening. Gunfire, screeches, explosions. One of them got Malik with a shoulder blast, sent him flying into a wall. He got back up, laughing, blood pouring from his mouth. He crawled to the base, dragged the disruptor out of his pack, and armed it with trembling fingers. "Go," he shouted. "Tell them Earth says hi." We ran. The explosion lit up the night sky like a second sun. The blast wave threw me into a ditch, ears ringing, ribs cracked. I could barely breathe. Smoke and fire everywhere, alien tech sparking, twitching, dying. The tower was gone. Malik was gone too. I stared up at the sky, and for the first time since this all began, I smiled. Because now, they knew. We weren't just hiding anymore. We were fighting back. The next morning, the tower's ruins were still smoking. Malik's sacrifice had done more than just destroy a piece of alien tech. It sent a message, loud and clear. We weren't prey anymore. We were fire. Chaos, the kind of threat that couldn't be cataloged or predicted, and the bastards in the sky had noticed. Our hideout got hit 3 hours later. They didn't wait. No scouts, no probes, just a straight-up orbital strike. One moment, I was checking the perimeter sensors, and the next, the ground shook like a meteor had punched it in the face. The parking garage where we'd made our home. Gone. Just like that. A hole in the earth where the last semblance of sanctuary used to be. We were lucky. If Reed hadn't called for the supply run early, we'd have all been buried. But lucky was a word that didn't mean much anymore. I stood at the ridge, watching the smoke rise where the bunker had been, the taste of ash thick in my throat. Riker didn't say anything. None of us did. We'd lost half our gear, half our weapons, and all our comms. We were cut off, stripped down to basics, and we were still alive. We moved, south, through ruined towns and shattered highways. Every so often we saw flashes in the sky, burning ships, silent fights in orbit. We didn't know who they were anymore. Ours, theirs, someone else's. Didn't matter. Space was bleeding, and the world had cracked open underneath it. Riker led the way, eyes always scanning. Antonova followed, never more than a few feet from him. I stayed behind them, my shotgun clutched like a lifeline. We were down to a group of 8 now. The rest, scattered, missing, or buried. We found shelter in the husk of a steel mill near Richmond. Iron beams twisted like fingers clawing at the sky, soot coating every inch of floor, and the air smelled like metal and blood. Riker paced, muttering under his breath. Something was off. "They're adapting faster than before," he finally said. "This isn't random retaliation. They're trying to stamp us out before we organize." "Too late," Antonova said, setting down a makeshift grenade. "We already are." But I saw it in Riker's face. He wasn't worried about the aliens adapting. He was worried that we weren't adapting fast enough. That night, Reed returned. She wasn't dead. She wasn't fine either. She stumbled into the mill with a limp and a cracked visor, armor melted on one side, and blood soaked into her sleeve. "They're using psychic recon now," she said through clenched teeth. "One of the squads. They got ambushed before they even moved." "Psychic?" I asked, stunned. "Yeah," she snapped. "Not magic. Just biology we can't compete with. They read intent, predict movement. It's how they tracked the last base. It wasn't the tech, it was us." Everyone went quiet. Then Antonova asked the question we were all thinking. "So how do we fight something that knows what we're going to do?" Riker didn't hesitate. "We stop thinking like humans." The next few days were training. Not the kind you do in boot camps. This was raw, brutal, almost animalistic. We practiced random movement, unpredictable behavior, made decisions by coin toss or dice rolls, anything to throw off predictive algorithms or psychic senses. I learned to move without thinking, to act without planning. Riker called it chaotic warfare. "Humans were never the smartest species," he said one night as we sat around a small flame hidden under heat-reflective sheets. "But we were always the most unpredictable. That's our edge. They think in patterns. We break them." The plan that formed next was insane. So insane that maybe it had a chance. We were going to hit one of their breeding centers. The aliens didn't reproduce the way we do. Their infantry wasn't born. It was grown. Grown in massive, webbed chambers filled with bioliquid and electrical pulses. We called them cradles. They were rare, heavily protected, and the backbone of their occupation force. If we hit one, hard and fast, and destroyed the larvae inside, it wouldn't just be a symbolic strike. It would cripple a whole region of their army. We prepped in silence. Built weapons from salvaged tech, bonded bullets with disruptor gel, lined our armor with signal-deadening foam. Reed showed me how to load a plasma charge properly. Antonova gave me one of her knives. "This blade's killed 7 of them," she said. "Make it 8. Riker was different during the planning. Quieter, sharper. You could see it in his eyes. He wasn't going in expecting to come back. The cradle was located deep in what used to be Fort Bragg. The irony didn't go unnoticed. They'd turned one of Earth's proudest military bases into a birthing pit for monsters. We moved in through the sewers. The smell was unbearable. Decay, chemical waste, rotting alien flesh. The tunnels were dark, but the deeper we went, the more the walls changed. Steel gave way to something else, something organic. It pulsed, breathed. We were inside their womb, and they knew it. We came out in a chamber lit by green-blue light. Suspended pods hung from the ceiling like grotesque fruit, each one filled with a twitching fetus, a future killer. The sound was horrifying. Liquid bubbling, soft squelches, muffled cries, hundreds of them, maybe more. "Plant the charges," Riker said, his voice flat. 2 minutes, then we get out." We moved fast. That's when the screaming started. Not human, alien. Guards flooded in, not like before. These weren't slow, lumbering brutes. These were elite, fast, precise, armed with weapons that glowed with antimatter tips. Bullets flew. Energy sizzled through the air. Reed dropped 2 with headshots before one impaled her through the chest. She didn't scream, just coughed blood and detonated her own grenade, taking 3 of them with her. I ran, covered Antonova as she armed the last charge. One of the elites caught me in the shoulder with a blade I didn't feel it, didn't care, just kept firing until my rifle overheated and melted in my hands. Riker grabbed me. "Go!" I looked back at Antonova. She smiled, just once, then pressed the trigger. The explosion swallowed everything. I woke up in the woods. My shoulder was torn open, my ears ringing, and my leg broken. But I was alive. Riker wasn't. Antonova wasn't. Reed wasn't. The cradle? Gone. Vaporized. I limped for miles, half-conscious, until I found a resistance outpost in a burned-out train station. They took me in, patched me up. Said word was spreading. About the cradle. About the black flame. About humans who didn't wait to be saved. They looked at me like I was a hero. I wasn't. I was just angry. And I wasn't done yet. I wasn't a soldier, not really. Even after everything I'd done, after the raids, the kills, the loss, I didn't feel like a warrior. I felt like a man who'd been backed into a corner too many times and learned to bite harder than anyone expected. But the people at the outpost? They didn't see me as broken. They saw me as proof. Proof that the aliens bled. Proof that their strongest could be killed. Proof that we didn't have to wait for help from the stars, because help was never coming. We were the help. Word of the cradle's destruction spread like wildfire. There weren't many victories to celebrate anymore, so people clung to this one like it was sacred. Recruits poured in, young, angry, hungry for revenge. Survivors from other pockets of resistance started making their way toward us. Some brought gear, others brought stories. One of them, a former diplomat named Kessler, told me something over a rusted-out table and a lukewarm can of beans. "They're scared of us now," he said, eyes flickering with something close to awe. "I've seen it. They're pulling their harvest lines back, replacing soldiers with automated drones. They don't want to risk more losses." I nodded slowly. "Good. Let them fear us." But I knew better. The aliens weren't afraid. They were calculating. And that meant they were preparing for something worse. We didn't wait to find out what. The outpost, nicknamed the Spine, because it was built into the skeleton of an old train yard, became our base of operations. Engineers cobbled together defenses. Runners scouted alien patrol routes. Technicians modified stolen gear into weapons that shouldn't have worked, but did. I trained the new ones. Kids, mostly. Some younger than I'd been when the invasion started. Wide-eyed, shaky hands, but willing. Desperate. I showed them how to hold a rifle, how to rig traps, how to disappear into the smoke when the fighting started. I told them stories about Riker, Reed, Antonova, not as legends, but as people. "We fight for the dead," I told them, "but we kill for the living." We called ourselves the Flame now. The black flame was gone. What remained had spread, multiplied, become something bigger. A symbol, a movement, not organized, but alive. One day I woke to the sound of static, not just the usual background noise, but a pulse, a coded pattern. "Signal?" I asked the Comtech. "Could be," he said, frowning. "Not ours, not alien either." I leaned in, listening closer. It wasn't in any language I knew, but it was human, rhythmic, intentional, like Morse code, only faster. We boosted it, cleaned it, ran it through every filter we had, and then we heard it. 3 words repeated over and over. "Help is coming." No one spoke for a while, then someone laughed. "Great. A little late, aren't they?" But the signal kept repeating, and eventually we traced it. Not to orbit, not to another planet, to Earth. It was coming from deep underground, somewhere in the Colorado wastes. That changed everything. For weeks we'd thought we were all that was left. But this meant someone else had survived. Someone with technical skills, maybe more. Maybe a command center, maybe a weapon, maybe... Hope. I didn't trust it, but I had to see it. So I formed a team. 5 of us. Myself, Kessler, the diplomat with a knack for encryption. V, a sniper who used to run with a biker gang before the invasion and didn't trust anyone with clean boots. Dane, an ex-cop with a bad temper and a worse limp. And Hannah, a medic who'd patched up more people than she could count and carried a sawed-off shotgun like it was a scalpel. We moved at night, crossed burned-out highways, ghost towns, and fields filled with alien husks, places where battles had been fought and lost. We avoided their drones, mapped their movements, took out scouts when we had to. 3 days in, we lost Dane. An aerial scanner picked up his heat signature while he was relieving himself behind a collapsed billboard. It was over in seconds. A bolt of blue energy from the sky turned him into ash. No sound. No chance. We didn't stop. By the time we reached the coordinates, we were half-starved, bleeding and exhausted. And then we saw it. An old NORAD bunker, hidden beneath a mountain, still intact. We approached cautiously. Kessler used an old access panel to plug in a bypass cable. It took minutes. Then the doors hissed open. And for the first time in years, I saw light that wasn't from fire or plasma. Inside were people. Dozens, maybe more, wearing clean clothes, eating hot food, armed with weapons we hadn't seen in years, pulse rifles, railguns, even prototype tech that hadn't hit mass production before the invasion. They looked shocked to see us. And then they let us in. The facility wasn't just a bunker. It was a think tank, a holdout of military scientists, engineers, and black ops personnel. They'd been here since day one, surviving underground, developing countermeasures, intercepting alien transmissions. They called themselves the Spine Division. And they weren't hiding anymore. They were planning a strike, a big one. They'd developed something they claimed could turn the tide. A virus, not a biological one, a signal, a code designed to corrupt the aliens' neural network, the communication field that linked their warriors, drones, and command systems. We inject this into their field, the lead scientist said, and we don't just cut off their orders. We drive them mad. What's the catch? I asked. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We need to upload it manually, at the source. And the source? Their orbital command ship. The room went silent. Getting to space was suicide. Boarding their ship, a death wish. But I didn't flinch, because I remembered Malik's smile, Reed's grit, Antonova's sacrifice, Riker's last words. We were never meant to survive. We were meant to make them regret coming. I looked at the scientist. You get us up there, I said. We'll handle the rest. The hangar of the NORAD facility didn't look like anything I remembered from the old military bases. It looked wrong, twisted. Half of it was Earth-made, lined with concrete and old steel beams. The other half, alien tech, black, breathing, humming softly like it was alive. They'd been salvaging from downed enemy craft for years, slowly learning how to rewire the monster's machinery. Now, they were planning to use it against them. The ship's called Virexa, the head engineer said, pointing to a floating schematic displayed on a cracked holoscreen. It's their flagship in orbit, part command center, part neural hub. Everything they do down here is coordinated through that thing. And you want us to break into it? I asked. He didn't blink. Not break in. Upload this. He handed me a small silver device, no bigger than my thumb. It looked unassuming. But it held a virus, code specifically engineered to corrupt the alien hive mind. Not just disable it, but unravel it. Disrupt the very thing that made them coordinated, intelligent, and efficient. Turn them into what we used to be, disorganized animals in the chaos of war. You put this into their neural core, and their entire communications web collapses. Ships go dark. Squads lose purpose. Drones wander without orders. We level the playing field. I stared at the device. It didn't feel like a weapon. It felt like a promise, The problem was getting up there. The aliens had total orbital control. All Earth's satellites were gone, and no working spacecraft had made it off the surface in years. But the Spine Division had a secret, one they'd been working on since the first month of the invasion. A ship. One of theirs. Crippled during a crash in the Nevada desert, and buried in secrecy ever since. The division had spent the last 3 years repairing it, learning to communicate with its systems, replacing damaged parts with a mix of human and alien tech. It wasn't beautiful. It wasn't fully functional, but it could fly. Barely. They called it Wraith, a stealth corvette rigged for speed, not comfort. It was angular, black, and stitched together with so many kinds of metal it looked like a Frankenstein monster. And it only seated 6. "You'll get 1 shot," the pilot, a wiry woman named Brooks, said. "Once we're inside the ship's cloaking field, we'll drift right up. No propulsion, no comms, no shields. If they scan, we're dust. If they see us, we're gone." "So don't get seen," I said. She smirked. "Exactly." We prepped in silence. Kessler loaded the virus module into a shielded pouch and strapped it to my chest. V ran last-minute checks on her weapons. Plasma bow, silencer pistols, 3 blades hidden in her boots. Hana packed the last of the medkits and explosives. We'd brought in 1 more for the run. Reyes, a demolition expert with cybernetic implants running down the side of his skull. Ex-Marine. Still had the discipline, none of the optimism. We launched just after midnight. The sky looked dead. A black void with pinpricks of light, but no stars shone the way they used to. Just broken skies and drifting debris. Wraith lifted like a ghost, silent and smooth, disappearing into the clouds. No one spoke during the ascent. It was too real now. Every second, every breath. It felt like the last. Atmo burned away in orange flame as we crossed the edge of space. Weightlessness settled in. Everything floated. Loose straps, sweat, fear. The silence out there wasn't peaceful. It was oppressive. And then we saw it. The Virexa. A beast of a ship, stretching for miles, covered in spires and antennas, with pulsing veins of red light across its surface, like some kind of deep-sea creature. It didn't orbit. It hovered, unnaturally still, like it didn't obey the same physics we did. Brooks slowed us down. Engaged the drift mode. We floated, silent, powerless, invisible, like a speck of dust moving through the air, hoping no one would breathe the wrong way. The ship grew larger and larger in the viewport. I felt my heartbeat in my neck, my fingertips, my teeth. When we reached the underbelly docking hatch, Brooks whispered, "We're in." We exhaled as one. Inside, the Virexa felt like a cathedral of bones. Everything was black and organic. The walls moved subtly, like they were breathing. Doors hissed open as we approached. There was no light, only bioluminescent veins pulsing red along the floors and ceilings. We had one goal: reach the central neural chamber and upload the virus. And we had one rule: don't fight unless you have no choice. We moved fast, silent. Every hallway looked like the last, curved, slick, warm to the touch, like we were walking through a throat. Once or twice, we saw guards, tall, armored beasts with glowing weapons and no eyes. They didn't see us. Not yet. But they felt something. I could tell. This place, it was alive, aware, and we were intruders in its bloodstream. It took us 22 minutes to reach the chamber. Kessler stayed behind to patch into the comms relay, jamming local signals. Brooks secured the ship. Hana and Reyes held the access corridor. V and I entered the core. It was enormous, like the heart of a planet. Dozens of tall pillars, each one covered in twitching cables and fluid-filled sacs. In the center was a glowing sphere, floating, spinning, humming with power. That was the neural core, I pulled the virus, walked toward it, then everything went wrong. The room screamed. That's the only word I can use. A sound like tearing metal and thunder crashing all at once. Lights flared, walls pulsed, V spun, weapons raised, guards poured in, from the ceiling, from the walls, from the pillars themselves. They didn't hesitate. V went down firing, blades flying, energy bolts searing through flesh. She took 5 of them before one drove a spear through her stomach. She didn't scream, just spat blood and detonated a mine at her feet. I ran. Everything became a blur. Blood, fire, screaming alarms. I leapt toward the core, slid the virus into the port. Then darkness. Not sleep, not unconsciousness, just everything vanished. When I opened my eyes, I was floating in a white space, and something was watching me. Not a creature, not a shape, just presence. It spoke without words, pressed into my brain like cold hands. "Why do you fight?" I clenched my jaw. "Because you tried to end us. You cannot win. You were never meant to. Maybe not, but we can make you bleed." Silence, then a whisper. "We see you now," and then nothing. I woke up on the floor. The ship was shaking, screaming, literally screaming. The virus had worked. I staggered to my feet. Ran. Found Hana dragging Reyes through a collapsing hallway. Kessler was already dead. His neck snapped, blood floating in 0G. Brooks was shouting over the comm. "Get to the ship! We're losing the cloak! 5 seconds until they fry us!" We sprinted. Gunfire behind us. Explosions ahead. The floor collapsed beneath Reyes, and he fell into the dark, still firing upward as he vanished. Hana pushed me into the hatch. Brooks launched the moment we were in. The Virexa behind us began to tear itself apart. Plasma fires erupting from its hull, drones spinning in circles, guards fighting each other. Their hive mind was broken. We didn't win the war. Not yet. But we'd burned their heart. And now they were going to feel what it was like to be human, to be angry, alone, and absolutely ruthless. The Virexa burned like a second sun in the sky. We watched from the upper atmosphere as it tore itself apart. Spires crumbling, energy veins rupturing, alien vessels drifting away without purpose. A few tried to flee, others collided mid-flight, spinning wildly into debris fields. The once perfect unity of the enemy was now pure chaos. I sat slumped in the co-pilot's chair, blood soaking my jacket, ribs cracked, and head pounding. Hana was beside me, wrapping a pressure bandage around a gash in my thigh. Her hands didn't shake. They never did. Even when everyone else was screaming, she worked like she'd been born in the apocalypse. Brooks was focused, guiding Wraith back toward the planet's surface. Her voice was calm over the comms, but her eyes were tight. She knew what we all knew. We weren't safe yet. As Earth's curve grew large in the viewport, we saw the scale of the devastation. From space, the planet looked like it had been burned in patches. Cities were nothing but charred scars. The oceans shimmered with wreckage. Entire forests were gone. Storms churned violently over poisoned coasts. But there were lights, sporadic, small, human, survivors, fires of resistance, and now they weren't just surviving. They were watching the sky with hope, because something up there had exploded. We had made them bleed, and the rest of the world had seen it. We touched down in the Colorado wastes, 20 kilometers from Spine Division. The Wraith's hull was cracked, her systems fried from the electromagnetic backlash of the virus's detonation. She wasn't going to fly again. We buried Reyes under the open sky, marked his grave with a piece of Virexa plating. V and Kessler had no bodies to recover, but we left stones for them too. No speeches, no tears, just names, etched into the steel. A promise that they'd be remembered even if the stars turned cold. When we arrived back at Spine Division, the place erupted in movement. Word had traveled faster than we had. Resistance bands had picked up alien transmissions, confusion, failure, panic. For the first time in years, Earth had dealt them a wound they couldn't cauterize. And humanity was rallying. They came from every direction. Tattered survivors, ex-military units, hidden scientists, even kids with bolt rifles and scrap armor. They poured into the mountains like a tide. They didn't care who led. They only wanted one thing: a chance to strike. I stood before them that night, still broken, barely able to breathe without pain. They asked for a speech. I didn't give them one. I gave them the truth. We're not special. We weren't chosen. No gods came to help us. The stars didn't send reinforcements. We were meant to die quietly, like the other planets did before us. But we didn't. I looked at their faces. Tired, scarred, angry, ready. We bled. We lost, and we adapted. We became ruthless, clever, merciless. We learned what the enemy fears. A pause. They don't fear strength. They don't fear weapons. They fear us, humans. I lifted my shotgun. Because we don't stop. The sound that erupted was unlike anything I'd heard before. A roar made of fury and pride, desperation and vengeance. It echoed off the mountains like thunder. War drums made from bones and broken helmets. We were done hiding. The alien response wasn't immediate. They didn't have the coordination anymore. Their units were scattered, disconnected, malfunctioning. Some just shut down. Others turned on each other. But they weren't finished. Not yet. Their fleets still hovered. Their ground troops still stalked ruins. But now they weren't facing a few scattered cells. They were facing us all. What followed was a different kind of war. We called it the Ash Months, a span of chaos where the entire planet became a battlefield. Guerrilla strikes erupted in every region. Rogue human bands struck convoys with explosives strapped to motorcycles. Underground tech labs turned air conditioners into signal disruptors. Entire cities rigged their ruins with traps. The flame had spread. I moved between zones, sometimes with Hana, sometimes alone, training new groups, delivering supplies, helping them hit harder, think smarter. We weren't fighting to win anymore. We were fighting to make them suffer. They adapted, of course, tried to reorganize, introduced new species, creatures built more like humans, capable of limited autonomy. They still failed. Why? Because we were mad now. Mad in a way they couldn't process. We didn't value life the same way they did. We didn't protect cities. We booby-trapped them. We didn't retreat. We collapsed buildings on ourselves to take them with us. We didn't fight fair. We fought like ghosts, demons, a species that had already lost everything and so had nothing left to fear. There was one moment that stayed with me. A refugee boy, 12 maybe, came up to me outside what used to be a church in Mississippi. He wore a helmet too big for his head and carried a rifle he could barely lift. His face was sunburnt, and his shoes didn't match. "You really broke their skyship?" he asked. I nodded. He looked up at the clouds. "My dad said humans were weak," he whispered. "That we'd lose, that we should give up." I crouched beside him. "What do you think?" He smiled, shy but fierce. "I think they made a mistake coming here." I gave him a piece of scrap metal from the Wraith. Told him to carry it always. He did. Last I heard, he became a scout leader on the Western Front. That's how we grew. Not through orders or structure, through stories, through fire, through fear. Because by then, the aliens had a word for us, a name they transmitted in corrupted frequencies. Suthatari. It meant the unrelenting, the broken flame. They'd come expecting slaves. They'd found monsters. And now they were burning in their own war. One day, a strange signal pulsed through the comms grid. Clear, precise. Not alien. Earth resistance. This is Relay Station Theta from Orion Expansion Protocol. We received your distress call. Pause. Reinforcements are en route. Estimated arrival, 7 months. We stared at it. The stars had finally answered. Late. Too late. I laughed. Not from joy, from realization. We didn't need them anymore. We were already winning our own war. We were already the monsters the galaxy feared. And when those ships arrived, they weren't coming to save us. They were coming to witness what Earth had become, what desperation had created, what survival had forged. We weren't part of their alliance. We weren't part of their peace. We were a reminder that when the galaxy looked away, Earth didn't die. It evolved. They said reinforcements were coming. 7 months out, traveling across dark space with promises of support, medical units, and clean banners waving from polished ships. It sounded noble, civilized, hopeful. But Earth wasn't those things anymore. Not after everything we'd done. Not after what we'd become. We didn't cheer when we heard the message. There was no celebration, no teary-eyed joy or speeches over radios. Just silence. Calculated silence. People exchanged glances. Some looked at the sky. Others kept cleaning their rifles. Because deep down, we all knew the truth. They were too late. And maybe, just maybe, we didn't want them anymore. I was in the Appalachian corridor when the news hit. A war zone dressed up as a refugee route. The trees had been scorched into black skeletons, and the rivers were thick with ash. We had dug out bunkers in the old coal tunnels, turned caves into hospitals and command dens. Survivors here were feral. They didn't take orders. They followed whoever bled hardest. I was overseeing an ambush on an alien supply drop, 4 armored transports, flanked by 2 command beasts and a half-dozen skirmish drones. Our scouts had tracked the route for days. The pattern was simple. The drop always landed on a ridge. They secured the crate, then moved east. I changed that pattern. We waited under the ridge, buried beneath leaves and mud, breath held and weapons charged. Our armor was patched, our guns stolen, our boots frayed to the sole. And we looked like monsters, not soldiers, not freedom fighters. We wore pieces of their dead, helmets ripped from fallen commanders, claws bolted to gauntlets. One guy, Tanner, had a whole alien jawbone strapped across his chest like a badge of honor. To the enemy, we must have looked like nightmares crawling out of the earth. And that's exactly what we wanted. The transports arrived. We didn't fire immediately. Let them get comfortable. Let them feel safe. Then I detonated the first mine. The ridge exploded. 2 transports flipped like toys. Screams filled the air, ours and theirs. The ground shook. We swarmed them like wild dogs. Grenades flew. Bullets and plasma mixed into a storm of death. One of their command beasts let out a shriek, a psychic scream that rattled my skull, but I didn't stop. I lunged, drove a blade into the glowing seam between its plates. It thrashed. I held on until it collapsed. By the time the smoke cleared, the aliens were dead. All of them. Their bodies twitched in the dirt, leaking blue fluid. The crate was ours. Inside, food, med kits, neural stimulants, armor repair kits, not meant for humans, but usable. That was the real difference now. We used everything. Their tech, their weapons, their bodies. We'd become scavenger kings on a poisoned throne. Later that night, I sat by a fire made from alien crates, sipping recycled water from a melted ration tube. Across from me sat Commander Tao, ex-military, ex-prisoner, now a leader of her own ruthless crew out of New Atlanta. She wore scavenged armor and had more confirmed kills than I could count. "So," she said, eyeing me. "Reinforcements. From Orion." "Yeah. You believe it?" "I don't have to," I said. "Doesn't change what we're doing." She chuckled. "You think they'll understand us? The galaxy? When they get here?" I looked up at the stars. Cold. Distant. Quiet. "I don't think they'll recognize us." She nodded slowly. I hope they don't. Over the following weeks, something began to change. The alien war effort slowed, not stopped, but fractured. Some of their units had started retreating, not regrouping, retreating, fleeing regions they'd once held for years, leaving behind broken tech, half-guarded outposts, and empty hives. Some even self-destructed rather than be captured. Their confidence was gone. Not because they were losing, because they didn't understand us. I watched one surrender once. An elite, cornered, wounded, dropped his weapon, held up those long, blade-like hands in a universal gesture of submission. We didn't even hesitate. We shot it. Not out of cruelty, out of necessity. We couldn't afford mercy. Not anymore. We didn't take prisoners. We took messages, and left them behind in the form of burnt-out ships, butchered patrols, and trails of broken limbs. They learned the hard way. Earth was no longer a battlefield. It was a culling ground. Then came the envoy. 5 months after the broadcast, a shuttle appeared in orbit. Not alien. Human. Clean lines, silver plating, solar wings stretched out like banners. It hovered in low orbit for hours, then descended. Slow, deliberate, broadcasting a signal on all open channels. Peace envoy of the Galactic Accord. We come to parley with Earth's surviving factions. Please respond. We didn't. Not at first. It landed near the ruins of Geneva, once the seat of diplomacy, now a wasteland of ash and concrete bones. They set up a base, set up tents, unfurled flags, waited. Eventually we sent someone. Me. Why? Because I had nothing left to lose. They looked so clean. That's what struck me first. The envoy team wore polished uniforms, smooth skin, fresh breath. They smelled like citrus and soap. No blood, no scars, no haunted eyes. They shook my hand, offered me food, spoke softly. We've come to aid reconstruction. Their leader, a tall man named Varen, said. Medical supplies, water reclamation units, clean energy tech, and, of course, negotiations for reintegration into the Accord. I didn't answer for a long time, just stared at them. Until finally, I asked, Where were you? They hesitated. We monitored the invasion. No, don't lie. Silence. Then Varen sighed. The truth is, Earth was written off. Written off? Yes. Based on early projections, we assumed total planetary loss. Intervention was deemed too costly. We prioritized containment. So you watched? Yes. I nodded. Then I stood, walked away from the table. Before I reached the door, I turned back. You didn't come to help? You came because we survived. And that scares you. Varen didn't respond. He didn't have to. I could see it in his eyes. The fear, not of our suffering, but of what we'd become without them. The Galactic Accord opened official talks. They sent diplomats, engineers, aid workers. They tried to teach us peace again, tried to clean the blood off our hands, tried to make us grateful. But we weren't. We listened. We accepted their tech. We took their tools. And we watched every move, every word. Because in our eyes, they were no different from the ones who invaded. Just dressed better, smiling while they waited for us to bow. But we didn't bow. Not anymore. And we never would again. We rebuilt, yes. But not like they wanted. We didn't restore cities. We built fortresses. We didn't disarm. We reforged. Children trained before they could read. Cities were designed around defense, not comfort. Every street, every sewer, every wall, weaponized. Every classroom taught tactics, languages, weapon handling. We didn't raise civilians, we raised survivors. Because deep down, we knew they'd be back. Not just the aliens, not just the invaders, but all of them. The ones who looked down on Earth. The ones who watched us burn and called it a loss on a spreadsheet. They were afraid of us now. Because we weren't victims anymore. We were unforgiving. And when the stars turned their eyes back to Earth, they didn't see a ruined world waiting to be saved. They saw a scarred monster, grinning. Years passed. The smoke cleared from the skies, but the ashes remained. Embedded in the soil, fused into concrete, powdered into the lungs of every survivor. No matter how much the Accord scrubbed and sanitized, Earth never went back to blue. And we didn't go back to being human, not in the way the galaxy remembered us. We had changed. Irrevocably. The war never truly ended, not in the minds of the people who survived it. The aliens, the invaders, were gone. What was left of them retreated to the stars, fractured and leaderless, a scattered swarm without a queen. The neural collapse we'd inflicted had shattered more than their military coordination. It had shattered their belief in dominance. The creatures that once harvested our cities now feared the dark, feared static on their radios, feared the sound of boots crunching bone and soil. But in peace, another war began, one of ideology. The Accord tried. To their credit, they tried harder than I thought they would. They sent engineers to help us purify water, terraform the scarred landscapes, and rebuild infrastructure. They offered medicine, education, diplomatic relations. They brought stories from the galaxy, tales of flourishing planets, united species, harmony. And we listened, but not out of gratitude, out of caution. Because every offer, every handshake, every carefully worded treaty came with a subtext. Change back. Change back into something the galaxy could stomach, something polite, something domesticated. They wanted Earth to heal. But healing, to them, meant forgetting. And we couldn't forget. Not the screams under the rubble, not the bodies burned into the pavement, not the silence that came when we begged for help and no one answered. We had buried our dead without eulogies. We had named our children after fallen comrades, not saints. We had survived without gods, without saviors, without approval. And now that the stars had returned, we looked up with eyes that no longer sought acceptance, only respect. I was appointed as a representative of Earth during the Accord's first planetary assembly after reintegration. I refused the title of ambassador. I wasn't there to make friends. I was there to remind them. The assembly took place on Lyra 7, a crystalline planet with floating cities and towers of light. Their politicians wore robes that shimmered like rain. They spoke with perfect posture and smiles made for diplomacy. I arrived in my patchwork armor, still scarred, still limping, still wearing a knife made from the bone of a dead invader. They ushered me into a chamber filled with hundreds of species, some with feathers, others with scales, some with no eyes, speaking through color and scent, all united under the Accord's ancient doctrine of peace. As I took my seat, the murmurs began. Is that him? One of the Earth commanders. They say he destroyed the hive ship himself. I let them talk. When it was my turn to speak, I stood and said only one thing. You let us die. Silence. Not a single delegate responded. Because they knew. I scanned the room and continued. Your treaties mean nothing. Your apologies mean even less. We're not here because of your kindness. We're here in spite of it. An alien with silver fins and 1,000 blinking eyes raised its tendrils. And what is it that Earth seeks, if not redemption? I smiled. A slow, humorless thing. Earth doesn't seek redemption. We are the consequence. I left the chamber before they could respond. I wasn't there to negotiate. I was there to warn them. The resistance never disbanded. It became our government. Not in structure, but in mindset. The people who had fought and bled for scraps of freedom became our builders, our leaders, our teachers. Their memories shaped the next generation. Children grew up learning survival before arithmetic, strategy before poetry. They were taught how to kill before they were taught how to kiss. It horrified the Accord. They called us a warlike civilization with destructive social values. They held debates about isolating Earth again, but they were too afraid to follow through, because the last time they turned their backs on us, we rewrote the rules, and they knew we could do it again. They sent sociologists, therapists, mediation specialists. They wanted to understand our trauma. But trauma was too small a word for what we carried. We didn't want to be understood. We wanted to be left alone, or, if not alone, respected. And if respect had to come through fear, so be it. There was a saying in the camps: "When Earth cries, the stars tremble." We were no longer the overlooked species on a backwater rock. We were the scar on the galaxy's conscience. I took a walk one night through the ruins of what used to be Paris. The Eiffel Tower was gone. So were most of the buildings. But someone had planted a garden there, twisting vines growing out of broken statues, sunflowers blooming from a crater. Children played there now, laughing, throwing rocks, pretending to be alien hunters with sticks and helmets made of scrap. One of them, no older than 10, ran up to me, out of breath. "You're the Flame Man, right?" I nodded. "You killed the brain ship? Helped?" He grinned wide. "When I grow up, I want to be just like you." I knelt, looked him in the eye. "No," I said. "You grow up better." He frowned. "Why?" I glanced at the sky, clear tonight with stars blinking softly. "Because I did what I had to. You do what you choose." He nodded slowly, the kind of nod a child gives when he doesn't quite understand, but knows he should. Then he ran off, shouting to his friends that the Flame Man had spoken to him. I watched him go, and for a brief moment, I hoped. I returned to Spine Division for the last time that winter. It had become a city, not a fortress, not a base, a city, homes carved into stone, schools beneath reinforced domes, wind turbines turning above sniper towers, gardens and factories and old walls still stained with the memory of blood. And a monument, built in the center of it all, a single pillar, jagged and rough, made from the hull of the Wraith, names carved into its side, names of the fallen, the broken, the lost. At the base was a single phrase, scrawled by hand in 50 languages. No allies came, only us. I stood before it, silent. I remembered Malik's laugh, Reed's dry wit, Riker's cold resolve, Antonova's calm fury, Kessler, V, Reyes, Brooks, Tau, all of them. Gone, but never forgotten. Because we had become the story, the warning, the legend. Not because we wanted to, but because no one else would carry it for us. In the years that followed, Earth became many things. A member of the Accord, a trade partner, a military powerhouse, a cultural mystery. But above all, a reminder that when the galaxy turns its back, when the stars go quiet, when no one comes to help, humanity doesn't go extinct. We adapt, we endure, we become something the universe cannot forget. Because buried under every city, every flag, every piece of alien tech we repurposed, one truth remained. No one saved Earth. We saved ourselves. And the next time the galaxy needed help, they knew better than to ask us with open hands and pretty words, because we would look at them the same way we looked at our invaders, not as victims, not as allies, but as the next lesson, the next scar, the next war, and when that day came, we would rise, not as the lost children of a forgotten planet, but as the ruthless survivors of 1,000 wars,